welcome to yet another episode of the Uganda Diaspora show. My name is Lynn Komugisha. Those of you who are meeting me for the first time, and that includes Paul Ndiho, but the rest we have met. Online, certainly. I welcome you yet again, and I thank you for joining us. We have had quite an eventful couple of weeks here in Uganda, filled with sadness and sorrow, but also we have got to see a lot. There's a lot happening, especially being the political season here back home. I want to welcome you, Paul Ndiho, formerly with the Voice of America. We're glad to have you, though would like to know where you are now. But as we'll come back later for that. Francis Kamuhanda of ANT, the US chapter. We have Kharim and Ntambi of National Unity Platform. And of course, Miriam Kyomugasho, Afrique. Washington, as the Awich Pollar is Major retired, Major Awich Pollar, external affairs at the NRM Secretariat. Very much welcome to the show. And Paul, I would like for you to give us a brief about what you're doing currently, since you were formerly with the Voice of America.
Thank you, Lynn, for having me on the show for the first time. I appreciate the opportunity. Wow, where should I start? Okay, I'll just keep it very, very brief. Until recently, I was employed by the Voice of America. I'd been working there for the last 20 years. Then all of a sudden, that came to a complete stop. President Donald Trump and his administration decided that Voice of America was no longer a relevant entity. So they wanted to shut it down and maybe look for alternative ways to convey their messages throughout the world using other means. As a result of that, were all put on administrative leave, and effectively since March 15th, were all put on administrative leave, and that never changed. And as we speak, most people have been terminated or laid off, and we don't know what is going to happen. We've gone to court. We've been fighting through the court systems here. Right now, as we speak, the case is up to the appellate court, meaning pending appeal. The judges are yet to decide on our fate. But as a result of that, I decided to move on and start maybe try the private sector, get into this media business from a totally different angle. So I decided to launch my own platform, Ndiho Media. So right now I'm speaking on behalf of my own platform, Ndiho Media.
All right. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you, and we hope things go well. But the rate at which Trump and his administration is getting shocks in all sorts of from all sorts of corners is very scary. Now we are seeing the bromance between him and Elon Musk tumbling. Whatever happened, I would really love to pick Francis Kamuhanda's. Francis, in a minute, I would want you to tell me what's happening between Trump and Elon Musk. What is happening, and how does that affect the governance structure of his administration?
Oh, thank you, Lynn, and the other fellow panelists. I just have one word. That is another business deal that went wrong. Thank you.
Miriam, what say you?
I'm one of those devil's advocates. So happy it's happening, and I wish they really fight so much more, because that duo, that joint venture, as Francis called it, that business is so bad for mankind. I think their unity is very devastating to the rest of human beings, and so the more they crash, the better for the world.
With this Brahmins taking a tumble, I wonder what happens to Dodge, because I think Elon was at the core, at the forefront of the Dodge. Paul, do you have something to add to that?
You're putting me on the spot. I didn't want to get into the politics of that,
And
but
you could say one sentence or one word.
but all I can say is that Doge will continue because Doge is already institutionalized as we speak. So the functions of Doge will continue regardless of whether Mr. Elon Musk is at the helm of that organization, or rather
Mm,
that federal agency.
okay, noted. Let's hear from Karim. Karim, what say you about this? And then I'll conclude on that with Major.
Hi everyone. Good morning. I think some voices are saying is those who are in support of what President Trump is doing are saying he had been hired as an expert for trial purposes as head of Doge for 90 days. The 90 days have expired. Unfortunately, by the time the days ended, there had been clashes between the two people, that's the president and Elon Musk. So we are all looking forward to see how things play out. But as for now, we are all watching closely and monitoring with deep concern, as the Washington people usually say.
Okay. Major, which as an external affairs person at NRM, when you see what's happening in the US, just one sentence is enough. What is your take? Okay, I think we will get back to him later. So, I was just really picking your minds, especially because you are on ground in the US. From where I sit, many of us are, of course, celebrating this fallout. We didn't see it go far anyway. But let's come back home. Not so long ago, the president of Uganda delivered his State of the Nation address, but it came at a time people had, there's a lot of deepening national reckoning of leadership transition, state accountability, and generally the future of Uganda's democracy. So many questions were raised, a lot of speculations, but also disappointments as he delivered the State of the Nation address, because then it is delivered at a period, the political atmosphere as it is at its peak as we head into 2026. And so there's a lot of expectations, and the delivery didn't seem to match up to that stress. Notable among the issues that he delivered on as his government, he said that Uganda is the seventh fastest growing economy in the world, and we'll get to dive into that because apparently we are now irreversibly a middle income country with our GDP per capita at 1,263 US dollars, and it is number seven, as he says. So we are growing at a 6.3% per annum, projected to be 7% next year, and will grow in double digits, of course, after oil. As usual, after oil is always our parting point. I want to begin from that point. There's so much that he mentioned. There's so much that we have achieved in the last year as a country, in regards to agriculture development, infrastructure. There's a whole lot. I wouldn't want to dive into it because there's so much economic progress and projections, industrialization, security and regional stability, you name it. However, the major question here is, and this is our topic of discussion, can the NRM government, honestly, as we head into 2026, can it harness, can it bring together, can it address the challenges that it is facing, but most importantly, whatever it is talking about having achieved, will we see it come to light come 2026? And I want to begin with the Francis Kamuhanda. when you look at the State of the Nation address and what we seem to have achieved, what there are several key governance issues therein. The question would be, really, is the NRM in with all the challenges at hand, with all the issues critics have put forward, will we see it make sense next year?
Thank you, Lynn, and other fellow panelists. I think it is a misguided word to say that what took place was a State of Nation address.
Oh, what was it?
It was Museveni giving a historical lecture about Uganda. Now, when you are entrusted with power and we are entering into a new financial year, I expect him to come and give accountability of what has happened in that specific year, of all the money, whatever was allocated, and then what is being projected. But as usual, when he starts in 1986 and so on, that is historical. So I don't think that is a State of Nation address. And then when you look at when he tells me that we are almost a middle income country, we are already there. I have always said I don't look at these things at a macro level. We should go to microeconomics. I'll give an example. Like the PDM, a smartly dressed project going nowhere. You saw most of the farms that were being visited were farms for some of the ministers. The Nabanjas are the ones you are going to parade farms as people who have benefited from the parish development model, and therefore, like, so what I'm trying to say, for me, I come from a village back home, and so do most of us here. I should be able to see that my father, my sister, my brother, at a village level, they are not struggling. But when you come and gauge the economy of Uganda in the hands of a few who even have not made that money, but have stolen that money, and then you say the economy is growing, that is a misnomer. That is fantasy. And it's what is holding Uganda back. We have to wake up from that and move forward. So I still think that, like, he hinted on something that he talked about, corruption. I'm glad he's aware. But the way how he was talking that he's going to fight it, the man walking against corruption. The man did everything, but corruption has not gone. Do you know the reason, Lynn? Because Museveni benefits from corruption, and he's corrupt, in fact, himself. Number one, you saw when he was going around with the PDM, how he was dishing out money. You remember the 100 million saga bonanza for people to deal with the bill, and his response and reaction. So, to me, if we are able to fight corruption from Uganda, is to first dispose of Museveni, and then we usher in structures that work. Generally, the whole thing is hinged on poor governance, and which the NRM and its cadres are the accomplices into that project. And therefore, we have to deal with them to ensure that now we can have a State of Nations address. So that then we say, okay, in this other year we did this. You saw he was repeating roads and roads every other time. And these roads have been under construction forever. And you say, are we going to keep reagitating the same things over and over and over and over? So I still believe that this the State of Nations address was to some extent a huge sounding nothing, because I expected him, when he keeps promising us oil. Do you know for how long we have been talking about oil? even countries that discovered oil later than us, like Kenya, they already exporting the oil. When we talk of gold, he talked of gold somewhere. Can he tell us where it is being refined? Can he tell us that now we have some gold reserves within the Bank of Uganda of the gold that is mined, apart from hearing people are being displaced from their lands because the people have spotted minerals there, or they are going to do some mining and so on. Is that the kind of development that he's trying to tell us? I vehemently don't agree with whatever he was saying, but
All right. Thank you very much, Francis, for that. I come to you, Paul Ndiho. And Paul, having been in the media for a while, I have a feeling you've been able to take a look extensively about Uganda's politics and definitely NRM's governance at the core. Because when we talk about issues of economic growth, issues of corruption and related issues, we are looking at the record, the NRM's governance record. I mean, this is all we know. 40 years, almost 40 years in or into. Issues of election integrity, corruption, decentralization, youth unemployment, and authoritarian tendencies. All these come to the fore as we, talk about NRM all the time. So I want to ask you, Paul Ndiho, do you see NRM going forward 2026? Is there hope for change? Can we have a different conversation in regards to NRM's governance?
Thank you, Lynn. I think I'm going to look at it maybe from a regional perspective. When he talks about economic development and everything that he has done in the last, let's say, 40 years. Yes, I will agree with him for the first time that in the last 40 years, the NRM government or Mr. Museveni has done incredibly well compared to some of the other countries in the region. For example, if you go to West Africa, as much as West Africa is very, very advanced in terms of democracy, and I'm talking about Ghana, Nigeria, all these other, whether it's Ivory Coast, all these other countries, have they have gone leaps and bounds in terms of democracy. But when it comes to economic development, they're still struggling. You look at, let's say, Central Africa, you look at the likes of Chad, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Sudan. When it comes to economic development there, yes, Uganda is way, way ahead. Even if you went to Southern Africa, and I've been to all these countries, Uganda has done remarkably well. But when it comes to democracy, I'm sorry to say that Uganda has lagged behind. Why? You cannot keep talking about the same things you talked about for the last 30, 40 years. Things have to change. And I think the core of that has been the leadership. I think they're still stuck into the same issue of saying we have the best ideas. Countries evolve, people evolve. When Mr. Museveni came into power, we were all young people. I was 6 years old. So think people evolve. So the country, as much as it has done very well economically, that's also subject to debate. And economically, is that reflected in the stomachs of the people? Because at the end of the day, politics is whether people can put food on the table for their children. People in the rural villages are feeling that economic development. If you went to a rural village, are you going to tell me that people there are able to speak to that? Can they authoritatively say that under Museveni's government, they have experienced economic development? Maybe in some cases, yes, but not to a larger extent. Because when I've come to Uganda, every time I get an opportunity to come to Uganda, I drive around. I've gone to Gulu, I've gone to Kalamoja, I've gone to Chisoro, everywhere I drive around. I've gone to Ntoronko, right? Just to get an idea of how people are living their lives. And so if we are talking about some of these achievements that the government has done, we have to connect it to the ordinary people in rural villages. Is this a reflection of what is happening in the country at large, or it's just happening in the cities? For example, in Kampala, yes, You go to Kampala. Kampala has been modernized. It's a modern city. It looks great. There are all these things happening there. But drive outside of Kampala, 20 miles outside of Kampala in either direction, the story is so different. So those are things that we have to look at it. But at the same time, you talked about corruption. I think one of the other things that has been Museveni's downfall has been how he has handled corruption. It's not just about talking about corruption or creating these anti-corruption agencies that at the end of the day don't mean much, don't have the teeth to bite. You have these institutions in place, but they can't do much. They can't prosecute people who are corrupt. If they were able to prosecute or bring these culprits to some kind of area where if you steal public funds, you're penalized, you are locked up, like some of these people who are locked up, I think this thing would end. But there is no structure for sure that goes beyond just the rhetoric that we hear. So there are a lot of things that that still need to be done for Uganda to get to that status where they're a middle income. If you compare Uganda to China, for example, look at China in the 1980s and look at China today. China has gone from almost being a peasant country to a first world country. Look at the Singapores, the Malaysias, and look at every other country around Uganda. They've done incredibly well. So if we are talking in 40 years, we are talking about this and this and that, and yet that is not reflected in the stomachs of the people. At the end of the day, it doesn't make sense.
All right, thank you, Paul, for that. Miriam, I come to you, and we've had conversations around the same issues time and over again. But in this recent State of the Nation address, Museveni attributed Uganda's steady macroeconomic indicators, including the 6.3% projected growth this fiscal year, low inflation at 3.6%, and a 6.1% appreciation in the Ugandan shilling, to what he called the NRM's correct philosophy, ideology, and strategic discipline. What do you say?
Like other speakers have said, I mean, all whatever he says, I think Museveni has had like a dream which never happened, and he keeps alluding to it, while the reality is totally different. What are people expecting? You can talk about middle income, like Paul said. What is the reality in people's pockets? Are people being able to afford food? Are people being he talks about 6.7% growth, and Paul is saying that Uganda is more developed than the rest of East Africa. But recently there was a report saying that half of the population still can't afford a decent meal, not to mention 2 meals a day. That's a population of more than 60%. We still have peasantry, which is above 67% of Ugandans are still in subsistence living, and the problem is corruption. Maybe that the resources, I think that the estimations, like people have, those who have resources have like big chunks of the money, and they are taking it away from public services that would improve the lives of the ordinary people. So as long as Museveni doesn't do anything about corruption, development won't be realized by the ordinary person, the ordinary Ugandan, and it would be just I mean, whether he makes, maybe if he does a lot of public services like roads and whatever, which are not done. All we see are figures. You see coffee prices have increased, coffee exports have increased, but what are the prices that the farm gets to the farmer? If you say milk prices have increased, what are the real income for the ordinary people? So generally, NRM, I mean, it's more of a recycled comments. We keep saying, yeah, this and that. For me, I'm looking at the way forward. What is the way forward for Ugandans? How do we get out of this limbo? It's one thing. I don't see Museveni changing, and I think I would like to hear from Fande Awich, Pollar, if his party has a different strategy. But we keep seeing every other year it's the same song, same story. Or you see which is going to change. Actually, for my wish, the State of Nation address comes after reading the budget so that we hold the president accountable. Why is the State House budget ever increasing compared to, say, the health, compared to education, compared to agriculture? A sectors which serve the public, but the political sector is the one which takes the junk of the taxpayers' money, the State House budget, the defense, the public serve, the political spectrum, all of it, the ADs, the parliament, all those people take the junk of the national resources that would be going to the people. And with such a structure, with such a financial and economic structure, you don't expect the people to ever develop whatsoever unless you change something on that.
Right. Thank you, Miriam. Karim, two issues come to mind with all that's with that the State of the Nation address, and one of them being that previously we saw, I think a week or two ago, the president still at Kololo apologized to the nation and specifically to Buganda for the mistakes. And again, in his speech, he said, this, in spite of these mistakes and many others, and the external meddling, as you have seen, Uganda is unstoppable. Um, Karim, with the report, I want to believe that what he delivered was a report of what happened, what transpired in the last financial year. Do you think that indeed Uganda is unstoppable?
Thank you so much. I will start with the nation address, the State of the Nation address, which has become a way of patronage. Seven recycles the same talking points, which don't reflect what is going on ground, like Miriam said. And I will pick up on a few things that Museveni takes pride of, especially in his 10-point program. One of which is democracy and restoration of social services. Now, when you say the country is growing, the country doesn't grow by buildings. It grows with what goes into people's pockets. Now, if you're talking about social services, I would assume you're talking about things like, how many people are pitching into the National Social Security Fund, where you have about maybe 17 to 20 million people between the ages of 20 to 40 who haven't contributed, who are outside, who are in the informal sector. Now, if you're saying you're progressing, and 15 years from now, those people are going to be coming to their later years into retirement, how have you planned for those people who have never been into the formal employment? They haven't contributed into the National Social Security Fund. How do you intend to make sure that your NRM ideology of giving PDM, which is also given to their peers, when you talk about national development and you think you're going to decentralize and give money to parishes, and the money is given out of the budget to serve each and every parish, but you're going to cherry pick which parish gets money, which parish doesn't get the money. I would pose the question: what happens to the money that was supposed to go to parishes that did it? Does that money come back into the national budget, or somebody runs away with it? Is that money annually, or is that money for 5 years? So if you look at those things, if you talk about things like corruption, that's open day corruption, where a government can come up with a policy, but it's going to implement it on a partisan level. So the things that the government always takes pride in are always very anti-government agenda, especially when you go back to what they call their 10-point program, even when it comes to talking about sectarianism. So whereas you had asked me about Museveni apologizing to the Waganda, I will go back. In his 10-point program, he talked about fighting sectarianism. But, if you're doing that, it shows that these people have been targeted. And not only that, you're having your son talking about teaching people Runyankore in his basement while he's torturing them. All these things are negative. They are negatives to the country. So I don't see anything like we look like we are moving 2 steps forward, but we are 3 steps behind, and we will be remiss. I will try. We will be remiss if we don't talk about where Uganda would have been if we had followed through with his so-called 10-point program. I had my friend Paul talk about Uganda vis-a-vis the other East African countries and other African countries. But when you look at Uganda from that perspective, you're comparing us to the lowest common denominator. And why am I saying that? Because in the 1960s, in the 1970s, our agriculture sector compared to what it is right now, it would have been better. I'll give an example of coffee. Between 1970 to 1976, Uganda had a coffee quota with the United States where we were exporting 15,000 tons of coffee from Uganda. We also had a tea quota. So all that failed. Even with all that money that Museveni had been channeling to PR firms and lobbyists to make sure that those quotas are re-established, we have failed. We have the coffee. We haven't raised the value at which it should be. But you are seeing musical shows to promote coffee. A musical show is centered on promoting coffee. That money would have been invested somewhere better, giving people seedlings, giving people empowering farmers. But you can't empower farmers by hiring a private jet to East African artist to fly into Uganda and then a chopper to somewhere deep in the village to promote coffee. If I would ask us, the short-term return on investment into that concert is totally zero, and long-term it will be forgotten. I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kharim, for that. Major Pollar, Awich, are you with us? I come to you. Please confirm you're with us. I think he's quite engaged with our guests from China, as he earlier hinted. So we're still about the same issue of NRM and Museveni and the State of the Nation address, but the wider governance problem that we face as a country. We see that in the 2026 general elections, President Museveni definitely will be aiming for the 7th term with opposition leader Robert Chagulanyi. If I could come back to you, Francis, I want to ask the question of the problem. Oh, sorry, I think I missed something there. Okay, let's proceed. Francis, I wanted to ask that all this posed a big governance problem in the country. And one of the major questions, one of the major issues that really critiques and analysts were, hinting on after the State of the Nation address was the fact that the president did not highlight or did not mention anything
Yesterday, they want
to do with
coffee. If you remember, he told us coffee, he told us water, coffee, tea, and then water. Now again, with one entity removed. Yesterday, man even told us coffee and tea.
You must be teaching the Chinese Runyankore.
Anyway, Francis, my question, I think I've prolonged it for long. My question is,
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
Major, I hear you. We wanted to ask that in relation to what happened at Kololo, State of the Nation address, there's quite a lot of achievements for the NRM party. The question is two-faced. One, we saw the launch of the National Development Plan 4 and also looking at the achievements of the NRM in the last 1 year. Can we be sure that the NRM will consolidate this in the coming 2026? And what strategy are they employing because there's governance problems?
Now, first of all, I must concede that I'm not giving you my fall. Reason being, I'm in the center, in the mix of sorting out my guest in Serena. This is not normally how I pay attention to discussion of this gravity. You could say it is what multitasking, but I think I'm overweight and I'm not giving my all in this. So I'm sorry for that. But nevertheless, I will make a comment. Now, in that, I'm also happy that there seems to be a consensus that NRM has done something and continues to do something. However, questions seem to arise as to way forward, or even the past, if we have done as expected, which we really concede that we would have wanted to do much. Even if you put it at a report card, I think we are just 75%. And 75%, if you put the pass mark at 50, 25% above is okay. So we have to agree to that and see how to do it. Now, the issue that is now on is the issue of we hear so much sentiments about human rights, and we think that we need to do much more about that, because institutionally, in terms of the institutions brought, courts of law, human rights commission, IGG, and the rest are there. The legislations that is in process is all there, but we still feel there are the sentiments and cries about state operatives, whether police or the military. There are those sentiments which we really have to get to on the drawing board and address it. In fact, short of that, we are very okay. And I've been talking to my friends that like you watch wrestling, and you see when you watch wrestling, they tell you don't try it at home. Now, the complaint always at home is that we don't have democracy, there's no freedom of speech. We have tested it recently in the Kiza Besje case. The Kenyan lawyer Martha came here wanting to practice. It took a bit of challenge to have her get a practicing certificate, which I personally
Oh, Major, we are losing you. Your network is bad. Major, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Oh boy. Okay. Major which? Sorry, we can't hear you. Apologies, I think, for that. Our network here back home is terrible, but I can understand. Francis, I wanted to ask a very interesting question. Which
Hello?
Yes. Okay, Major,
Do you
please go ahead. Now your network is okay.
Now, you see, the problem with WhatsApp call is that when a trunk call comes, it cuts off the WhatsApp connection. So we have to fight with the trunk call coming in. Now, I'm saying that we may not have done that well. We really want it better than that. And you could have heard comment from General Saleh and all that, but we have not been there. But if you do comparative analysis in the region, you can see with the recent event that we have tried and continue to try. If the Kenyan lawyer can be allowed to practice law in Uganda, in court martial and other courts, and Agatha is going there, Agatha tear the parliament into pieces here, and we said, fine, it is your right, it is your view, you have a freedom, and she did it. And the same Agatha goes to Tanzania and she's tied, carried to Mutukula near Masaka, and
Maybe that's one of the issues NRM has to fix.
I'm
The phone
telling
calls.
Exactly, that is infrastructure development. He's now a victim of his own making.
Nobody is that that's the place which has the best network.
No, but when you're using a phone and a call comes through, everything else goes away. So okay. Major, are you with us? Okay. Right.
The trunk call cuts. I don't know how to cut it off. The trunk.
Hey, why don't you work with the networks to make sure that NRM fixes that?
Again,
Major, I think we're going to have to let you maybe first finish what you're doing. When you have a minute, you can join us
We still
because
feel we are again.
the network is really
Again. Now, I'm concluding by saying that we have to compare the figures plus the reality, and we are alive to that fact, and we are addressing. But recent events in the region, I think, vindicate us that much as you there's the feeling that we are that dictatorial. I think at home you may not take advantage or even see and appreciate what you have. It is until you go out and you see the lacking outside, then you say, I think at home we are better. So for this segment, I stop here. But I must apologize that I'm in the mix of things in Serena Hotel, Kampala, which is making me not give you people maximum attention. Thank you.
all right. Thank you very much, Major. We understand what you have to grapple with, so it's all right. Okay, Francis was coming to you, and the question I wanted to during the State of the Nation address, the president.
You come and see.
You didn't cut it.
Okay.
What I was saying, sir.
Mute him. All right. Okay, great. So what I was saying is that when the president was giving the State of the Nation address, he did not, in a way, talk about the rule of law excesses by security forces of the country, and so that poses the question of what now, because this is a major issue, a major national issue, because most people have raised it before him, most people have raised concern, and as we head into 2026 general elections, it definitely tarnishes our image internationally, our human rights record, and generally our rule of law has been weakened. So he did not say anything about it. Was that intentional, or was it what could he have missed it, or he has no idea what's happening?
Thank you, Lynn, and other fellow panelists. I'll first, before I forget, I'll first sympathize with Pollar, but I do understand him because that's what he's supposed to do to defend the indefendable. But I'm glad also at the same time, like he has been a victim of the poor infrastructure that we have always talked about, and he's blaming it on the trunk call. But then there should be technology of how you can separate his trunk calls or whatever from the main call. But also at the same time, I don't agree with his comparison. Okay, since even in Tanzania they are torturing people, then we are okay in Uganda because it is like a common practice, maybe in East Africa or in Africa. That's what we are trying to condemn. And when you want to make a comparison, for example, if you want to find out which fruit tastes better, you don't compare an apple to an apple. Or you don't, if I want to know how tall I am, I would go and compare myself with Paul, who is taller than me. But if I get another short person like me, and then I begin, oh, am I taller than him? It doesn't make sense at all. You can't compare, like, we are sort of democracy, we are in a dictatorship, and you compare it with another one. In fact, those other people are students of Museveni. Suruhu, Tanzania, then you go to Kenya, Ruto of recent, and so on. Whatever was being done in Uganda, he wanted to go and duplicate it in Kenya, and so on and so forth. But anyway, having said that, when you look at the torture and Museveni deliberately not commenting about it, whether it was deliberate, yes, it was deliberate, because I have always said NRM has graduated into a terrorist party and its regime, and I mean it, where you inflict as much pain as possible to people for purposes of changing their ideology or to intimidate them, not to participate in a democratic kind of governance. And that's what they have been doing. I'll give you an example. You still remember when Robert Chagulanyi was beaten in Arua. The president said, "Oh, I went and watched the clip. Generally, he was beaten very well." So would I get surprised? The same Museveni hearing that people are running Runyankore in the basement, they are being tortured, and then he will come and say, maybe what Moses does is under the instruction of the father. You remember when he told us that his son, he named him Mohozi, so that the avenger, he can avenge for him if you do something bad to him. Maybe this is part of it. But at the bottom line is we have to ensure as a people and do better. Can we continue with this, like torturing fellow Ugandans, torturing maybe fellow East Africans, and then we call it progress to celebrate? The answer is no. Now, during the Kawempe elections, you saw how the NRM terrorists were making rehearsal, so that now in the forthcoming 2026, now they will have learned how best they can continue torturing Ugandans. So for him not talking about torture, because that is the tool that he uses, was deliberate, and he doesn't see a problem with that. Because if we can go, maybe here when he tortures people, he enjoys it. Then we should begin asking, what did he do when he was in the bush? If we can torture people like this in broad daylight, I sympathize and feel for those, and I will begin praying for their souls to rest in peace. Those who faced him during the Bush War, they must have suffered more than what we are seeing currently. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Francis, for that. Miriam, I'll come to you. And still relatedly, we are seeing that as the political campaign season gains momentum, there's fear of, yes, we saw 2021 was quite a very bad period with violent elections, but there's great increasing fear that this could be worse, because already there's threats of fire insecurity from security forces, and already with the 4-decade on, let's put it that way, hold on to power, there's deterioration in human rights, there's deterioration in political space and civic freedoms. So the ground is already on fire, as we head into 2026. So already we are, and another biggest problem is that the issue of presidential succession is uncertain. All this really makes Uganda look like it is on fire. It is boiling within, and yet we are yet to see a volcanic eruption in Uganda. What say you, Miriam?
Lynn, thank you so much for that. During this State of Nation address, my wish was that, of course, I was dreaming, but I was wishing this was this was like those addresses where the president say, "Okay, this is my last State of Nation address as we prepare for transition." ABCD. It's 40 years. For God's sake, what else can he do? But on the contrary, this is a man who is desperate for a win, who is not even ready to give democracy a chance, just in case another person wins. Under normal circumstances, if you are facing elections the following day, you would be saying, okay, in case another person wins, this is the state of security, the transition will be like this. In case my party doesn't win, I'm sure I'm handing over ABCD to the next government. But he doesn't even have that in mind, which means that even election is just like a ritual for him to prolong his stay in power. And in that case, it's a do or die for him and his party, and they must do anything, including killing people. We have already seen that. And progressively, the situation gets more worse and worse. 2021 was worse than 2016. So what do we expect in 2026? Especially given the current state of UPDF and other security agencies. This is a UPDF we see attacking even the police. This is a UPDF which looks to be off rails. Seven was priding himself all along. I know people like my mother would vote NRM and say, at least we have peace. And we were sure that there was some semblance of professionalism in UPDF. But given the current commander-in-chief of UPDF and the way they are conducting themselves, everyone is doubting. Things is the center still holding in UPDF. What is the state of security agencies in Uganda today? Are we sliding back into like the main situation where the army was everything, where the gun was the rule of the law, was the law in itself, like whoever has a gun had power? Because the current state of, and it's a shame that President Museveni, who prides himself in security, that's his strong point, ensuring security. And he has done it, with a few gaps here and there, but generally he's kept Uganda peaceful on the surface. If you are not a political opponent, at least you are assured of going back home. If you don't meet a few thugs here and there. So there was some percentage of security here and there. But today, all that is being doubted. Are we still secure? What type of UPDF are we dealing with? What type of police are we entrusting our lives to? Because the police we see today, the police which is beaten and imprisoned by another security agency, really, I'm not trusting them so much to protect other Ugandans. Are they secure? Are they safe? So it's which Fanda, which you would tell us where your NRM party stands on this, but the way I see is like NRM is that party which has lost support. Like we saw in Kawempe, it's a party, if they do bribe you and you don't vote for them, they would rather beat you or do anything else or run away with ballot boxes, but ensure that you don't vote the opponent. So what type of support do they have now and the percentages? If they continue to decline, like I suspect, so you would expect them. I don't even expect the current electoral commission to hold them accountable, as in, is it in charge? That was a scenario, as part of civil society, I was involved in some like election monitoring, and we were trying to apply to get accredited to be part of the monitoring team during the voter display register. But you have to be vetted by security agencies now to qualify as an NGO to be part of, to be accredited to monitor elections. Everything is about the army or security apparatus, whatever it is, whether it's the army or police or whatever name they call it now. Everything is about them, and even them, they are so disorganized. We see they are the people who are beating others in basements. Even the institution can't discipline its commander. Usually they should have like internal disciplinary mechanism, but nobody, including the commander-in-chief, has come out to condemn the actions of the CDF. Nobody has come out to condemn the actions of SFC forces attacking the police. So, which means they condone it, and that's something to be scared about as a Ugandan. Suppose instead of attacking police, tomorrow they attack a school, tomorrow they attack a certain office, like the way they like attacking NGO offices. Tomorrow, if they decide to attack people on the street, who's going to stop it? Who's going to protect Ugandans?
Right. Right, right. Thank you, Miriam, for that. Paul and Ndiho, I'll come to you. Still on the State of the Nation address, and one of the most, I think, prominent strategies for the NRM government, but also particularly for the president. He reiterated his vision for the East African Federation. He emphasized the need for economic integration and cooperation, but we know that there's been growing debate over the feasibility and benefits and potential benefits of this federation. In light of what Francis already highlighted, we saw that there was a transnational activism. Our activists here in Uganda moved to Tanzania to have to extend some support to a fellow activist, or would say Tanzania's opposition leader, and that is Tundu Lissu. They were just in court, following up on the proceedings of court, and then they were roughed up. The story I'm sure you've come across. The question here is, does the East African Federation really matter if we cannot address the little small issues of inter nation trade, the little issues? I mean, they beat them up, they roughed them up, and threw them at the border, and we just had to pick people out. I want to believe that we start from there. So, Paul, what do you make of this East African Federation?
Thank you, Lynn. To put it politely, I think it's just a facade. We don't have a federation. If these countries, let's take it back for a minute. The East African community, when it was formed, I think it had good intentions. It was supposed to be a body that really takes the East African countries forward, not backward. But as you can see, or as we have seen in the last couple of days, this is just a mere club of, let's say, those leaders who aspire for different things. We cannot have a federation where people cannot cross borders. People from these other countries cannot go to these countries. You talked about the issue of Agatha being beaten up and assaulted in Tanzania. As an East African, that shouldn't be happening. That thing of economic integration, there is no way we can have an economic integration when we can't sort out the basic issues. These are very basic things that we shouldn't even be talking about. I want to go back to the point that which you made earlier, talking about Martha Karua coming to practice law in Uganda. That's great. On the surface, it's a great thing. But should it even get to that point where a Ugandan opposition leader is taken from Kenya and handed over to the security agencies? That's what kind of integration is that? If there is cooperation, if a Ugandan cannot come and visit Kenya or go to Kenya without fear of being caught up and handed over to security, what type of federation is that? So I think, for me personally, I think this business of having the East African community is just a facade. It doesn't work, right? When you look at the politics that is being practiced in all these different countries, it's very, very telling of what East Africa is all about. You look at maybe Kenya, on the other hand. Kenya has a semblance of a little bit of democracy. At least the opposition there can sit down and have a conversation with the ruling government. We've seen that happen with Raila Odinga, Uhuru Kenyatta, Raila Odinga, and Ruto, and even previously with Mwai Kibaki, even more, right? They at least would sit on the table. When it comes to Tanzania, forget about it. Tanzania, on paper, yes, there is a semblance of transfer of power. Every couple of years, maybe 10 years, there is leadership change at the top, but the power structures never change. And when it comes to democracy in Tanzania, there is really no democracy when you have one party in power that has been there. The opposition in Tanzania has no voice, absolutely no voice. You cannot criticize the government. You cannot speak out. You saw what happened to these colleagues of ours, or people from Uganda and Kenya, how they were treated, including the Martha Karua, how she was deported from Tanzania. So how do you talk of a federation when those basic issues are not addressed? How are you going to have a common currency when a simple trader cannot cross the border to either to sell their tomatoes or their onions across the border? Those things cannot work. So on paper, yes, it's a great thing, but in reality, it just doesn't work. And the politics of the day, I don't think when you look at how the politics is being carried out in all these countries, uh, I don't think there is anything close to a democracy in those countries. You look at Uganda, you look at Tanzania, you look at Rwanda, you look at South Sudan, you look at DRC Congo. Those are all members of the East African community. Maybe Kenya is on a different, I would put Kenya on a different pedestal here. Why? Because at least for Kenya, not only do they practice what we call maybe a democracy, but at least they believe in it. I don't think in Uganda, the president, yes, quote unquote, he calls himself a Democrat, but I don't think he believes in democracy. If he did, he would not be locking up his opponent. He would not be going after his opponent. The same thing in Tanzania. The same thing in Rwanda. Look at Rwanda. For you to win, the president wins an election with 99.8% of the vote. So what type of democracy is that? Or what type of federation is that?
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. And I like that you take us in that direction. And I want us to keep there. I come to you. Major, are you able to speak to us? But before that, Kharim Ntambi, still in regard to a federation, we know that it has been at the heart.
Hello?
Yes.
You want me to talk?
If you have a minute, please confirm.
Yes, I have. Maybe you put the question to me.
Fantastic. And no, I just wanted to first make sure you're with us and able to speak. I wanted to talk about the something that is very dear to the president, and that is the East African Federation, which you already hinted on in regard to what happened to our friends Agatha and a gentleman from Kenya. We're saying that in as much as he is passionate about the East African Federation, there's still the basics, the small things that might come off as small, maybe not, important on paper, but such small issues matter to the bigger picture of the federation. So what next? How are we addressing these issues that are huge bottlenecks in the East African community?
The East African community, Uganda and particularly Museveni is so passionate about it. And we have gone a long, long way. Possibly, we are the only country where in all our national function, we sing both anthems. Tanzanian sings, but at very selected functions. But for us, you have known that it has almost become a norm, and it is going down even to the village, that before a function, when you are singing Uganda national anthem, we sing the East African. Two, I think we are proved by what you'd call under the provision of cross-country, cross-border labor, because the fact that we accepted under the law that Martha could practice law in Uganda, we have done a long way. So, and many other things. Even in Serena, where I am, the person who is managing my business is a Kenyan. Now, the only thing that we should take note is that the East African community, like African Union, like United Nations, has not taken away sovereignty of states at once. So we are now grappling with that progressive achievement of the intentions and the aspirations. So when we struggle with the progressive achievements, we get one by one. It's a long way, and it depends on the zeal of a particular country. But as I said earlier, I think we lead in East Africa in as far as the zeal is concerned. Kenya doesn't play East African anthem. I was there recently in Kenya. They made us inspect a guard of honor. We attended the many functions, but they don't play it. So, much as it is a dear thing to Museveni and to Ugandans, now we have been persuaded. We are doing our part and we have done it, and the practical aspect is seen. So we leave it to our brothers on how fast they manage this progressiveness. They call it progressive realization of the community. But I think in the progressive realization of the community, Uganda has done a lot more. So we pray that our brothers in the other 5 countries or 6 countries also move faster in that progressive realization of the intention of the community.
Thank you, Major, for that. Kharim, Ntambi, we are looking at the bigger picture of integration of international relations and the foreign policy agenda of Uganda. We see that whereas he highlighted that despite budget falls and donor cutting aid to Uganda, we still managed to, go through and manage with whatever we had as a country. But we see that there's continued issues. Look at what happened with the German embassy and the leaders there when they visited his brother up north. We saw that the army came forward to say a lot of stressing things and things that were quite undiplomatic. So we seem to have severed diplomatic ties with Germany. We are there's a lot of tension with our international partners, and as we go into the elections, we have seen donor cuts. A lot of issues.
Come and we resolve this thing of the ban.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynn. I think the greatest challenge with integration to start with is we love the rhetoric around it. We like the talking points of we are East Africans until when we are to be held accountable. Even when it comes to international law, Uganda takes pride in being part of different agreements. But when time comes to holding us accountable, we assert our sovereignty. We would say, "Oh, this is a sovereign country. There is nothing you're going to tell us." And I'll give an example. I'll first go back to what Paul was talking about, the issues within the East African community. Like so many countries have, but whereas we talk about, we are integrated, we are the greater East African community. There are so many countries within the community that don't, talk eye to eye. You would look at Uganda and the DRC. We are indebted. We are paying them $335 million for the plundering, for the loss of lives up to a quarter, 500,000 people have died in Eastern DRC for stealing mineral resources. All of that. If you look at the relationship between DRC and Rwanda, you would realize they also have conflict on the eastern part of Congo, where those two countries have been having a clash. When you look at now South Sudan and Kenya, they have also been having their own issues. So when it comes to the integration rhetoric, we are East African. When it comes to we can sing Kumbaya, as the Major was alluding to, he loves the idea of us singing. But when it comes to us, being held accountable, we are sovereign. So what does this do on a global structure? It takes away from us the trust that our development partners might have with us, because it's okay when we take their money, but when they are going to do monitoring and evaluation, we are going to call them granddaughters and grandsons of the colonizers, and they will not tell us what to do. And yet, when we go to seek their support in terms of money and investment, we are partners. We are partners in development. We are partners in research. We are partners in security and democracy. but we can never be held accountable. So, and until we humble ourselves to the point that we can be held accountable by the treaties that we sign, we can only talk about the integration, and we can only talk about being international partners. Otherwise, we are not going to be trusted by our development partners. We are not going to be trusted by our neighbors. So um, largely because President Museveni and his surrounding, leaders are good at singing integration. They are good at singing the Greater East Africa, and we have lost a lot of opportunity. I will give an example of the African Continental Free Trade Area, where some other countries are really doing good. Kenya has been, doing great trade with South Africa, and Rwanda is also doing a lot of coffee export to West Africa. Those are some of the opportunities that Uganda would have been taking, advantage of, even within the region. But we are not taking advantage of our immediate neighbors. If they will tell you who is your immediate, trade partner, Uganda is going to cite for you Serbia, and countries far away from the region. Uganda is exporting milk to Algeria and Morocco under the African Continental Free Trade Area. But such opportunities would have been better to first settle the ground, make sure that at least in the region we dominate that market. That when we talk about milk, at least in East Africa, Uganda comes first. But you're hearing about Ugandan milk in Nigeria, and you're not seeing it on the shelves in the DRC. You're not seeing it on the shelves in Rwanda and Tanzania. So you're leaving the immediate market, which is about maybe 180 million people. That's a market enough for you to do business than pandering on the far away. So I think the East African community should embrace being held accountable. We cannot just be singing, saying kumbaya to the East African anthem and not putting to task the tenets that are in the song. There are two things: there is singing the song, but there is also practicing what is in the East African anthem. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Indeed. Thank you very much for that. I want to come back to you, Francis, and the major issue. Well, when you look at what critics were saying earlier, there's a lot of uncertainty over next year's general elections. Yeah. Even during the State of the Nation address, they'd hoped there would be some address to it, and also increasing public anxiety over the question of presidential succession. At this point in time, shouldn't we honestly have moved away from expecting the president to get up and tell us, you know what, I think I have identified a successor, or I know next year I'm not going to stand as president as a contestant in the general elections?
Thank you, Lynn, and other panelists, and thank you for that question. Generally, even when we talk of succession, we are reducing ourselves to more of a monarch. And that's why we say the failure of democracy. Under a democratic dispensation, where even we went into multi-party politics, that wouldn't even be a question. It would be that we all know if we had not, if the NRM had not raped the constitution of Uganda by removing, number one, the term limit, then number two, the age limit. So within the internal structures of a party, they would be saying, okay, this is a flag bearer. And then we go and, if we had not also defranchised the population, because Ugandans were defranchised, we don't vote for our leaders. Because whether we vote for our leaders and the NRM has the mechanism to do all the rigging and then they determine who becomes the president, that's where the problem is. But otherwise, Lynn, what we would be grappling with would be that, like the NRM, they have their internal structures. They are parading a different person as the president. Maybe as ANT, the same. Maybe as NUP, the same. DP, the same, and so on. And all these pool of leaders that different parties have pulled out as their best, as the cream, then the Ugandans would select from those, depending on different manifestos or agendas that different political parties have in terms of how the country should be developed, and would have matured long time ago. And believe me, Lynn, what we are talking about, even the economy and so on, it would have even grown much more. For me, where I don't agree is that when you want to tell me that Uganda is economically okay, let's first compare it with other countries that were at the same level with Uganda and now where they are. So to me, I still believe that yes, for NRM, it is the monarch. For them, they have to. It is Museveni who decides whether he's going to continue or not. But of course, for them, you have heard them singing Tova Kumain and so on. But do I say that what they are doing is the right thing? No. These other people who are around Museveni realize that he's so hungry for power that they use it as a bite for them to loot what belongs to all of us. Provided they say we are not touching your seat, he's comfortable. And then they begin looting left and right. That's why you see we have an untouchable. That's why you see he comes and defends it in public. That, oh, if you do lifestyle auditing, these people are going to take the money away from the country. Statements like, oh, it's good that these people are stealing government's money and they are not stealing other. And you ask, the whole president of a country doesn't even know the best definition of a government and where this money comes from. So I still believe that when it comes to 2026, for us who are in opposition, we are doing our best to ensure that we get the best candidates that we can sell out there to the population. But because of limited civic education, even when we have best candidates that we can sell to Ugandans, we are not allowed because it is a process, Lynn. We should have started long time ago. But you go and make a rally, because how for him he has been doing PDM. They will come and lynch you and beat you up. Yesterday I saw the UPDF doing a public relations for him, campaigning for him in a village called Buwere in Imbale, where I think a helicopter during the PDM blew up a roof of some resident. But when this person went to deliver the compensation to repair the roof, said, oh, I thank the president of Uganda because of this arrangement and his office, and also the CDF, who is the son of. And you saw that it was like staged strategically that to go and sell these people the other side. So to me, I find it a challenge, like as how they want to make Uganda into more of a company or a business, that when this person goes off, then the CEO has said either this so and so should be the next one. But if we want to run a real country the way how it should be run, with its structures and so on, we need even not to be talking about transition. The Constitution had it all, but the NRM ripped the Constitution, and that's where the problem is. So if we are to go and say, where do we begin from? We have to first go back to our members of parliament, who I don't know whether these are honorable members of parliament or are horrible members of parliament, because they would be debating on bringing back the term limits, entrenching that clause, and entrenching the age limit, and then we would be progressing. Think of the ideas that you have, Lynn. You can also make a good president and bring in more other things to focus on. But all these generations are being suffocated just because of one ideologically outdated or exhausted old man, and who even no longer knows what is going around, but he's being moved like swings like a pendulum bob in either directions and so on, and you don't understand exactly. But we are in a dangerous situation. Thank you.
Right, right, right. Thank you, Francis. Miriam, I come to you, and still, because all that we are talking about, the State of the Nation address and whatever was in it, is all speaking to the issue of governance. And we know with governance, things are clear cut. We know their systems, their operations. There's a way, there's a process. There are processes involved in governance, and certainly we are seeing that in Uganda it is lacking greatly. So I ask, how can how can Uganda's governance be improved, especially in areas of accountability and transparency, but also importantly, democratic principles?
I think you're that's basically the main cry. Like how can even the system work? Even we fail even to implement what is in the constitution. How can the governance work? The three arms of the government, which are supposed to hold to check each other and hold each other accountable, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, are now controlled by the executive. Then another arm, which would have been the people, as in civil society, non-government actors, the academia, the other institutions, the religious groups, and the political parties also, which are political, and their duty is supposed to check the government to ensure that it's accountable and things are moving right. They are all subdued. Like Francis said, even political parties can't be allowed to address a mere rally. If you are a political party and you can't even talk to your voters, how are you supposed even to check even the government? Like, you can't do the bare minimum. The role of political parties would be like to challenge the government in waiting and hold it accountable, as they also rally support for their parties and make a build up to the next elections, and be able to challenge if the government is not functioning well, and put their agenda to the people and see that whether the people choose them as the next leaders. But all that is non-functionable in Uganda today, and it's been like that for a lot of for several years back. And what's the way forward? I think that's my. It's like a cliche. I keep asking, what's the way forward? Like, in such a situation, how do we move out from that? How do we get out of that? I'm not going to advocate for another rebel movement like Museveni did in 1970s and 80s, because when things really get stuck, the only way seems to be like that option, which is not commendable, because it leads to more death and suffering of the people who are already suffering. And there are other options. How do you really change the system? We've seen people rising up like in Egypt, in Sudan, and everywhere. But unfortunately, even that system has to be supported by systematic change, like at the institutional level, for it to be sustainable. And in Uganda today, to make matters worse, anyway, I saw World Bank reinstating their financial support to Uganda, I think yesterday or somewhere in the media. The international community which was supportive of the effort to check the government excesses. Countries like USA have withdrawn or stepped back a little bit, and that leaves us in a limbo. As civil society in Uganda is already disabled. Major agencies which we are talking about, politics like DGF, were closed a long time ago. So the little that was remaining there, even now, is like struggling to function. So who's going to check the government excesses? Governance is about checking each other, checks and balances, and giving people a voice and ensuring that there is consensus on how the government is run. But In Uganda today, who's going to do that? The academia is really somewhere sleeping. I don't know what happened. But to no surprise, the Minister of Education is also the president's wife. So I don't expect institution to challenge her or do whatever, given the dictatorship that is around. So even the academia was killed, if I can use the word. So right now, what is going to happen, Lynn? I can also pose back a question to you. How do we get away from this? How do we move forward? Should we?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the question everybody is asking on ground, even if they're not taking up microphones, to be as loud as we are. But everybody's asking what next? How do we move forward? How is the country going to look like after all this? And indeed, it is very disturbing. Paul, Ndiho, I see your hand up, and I wanted to pose the same question I asked to Miriam, that can Uganda's governance be improved? Of course, especially in areas of democratic principles. Do you see that happening? But please go ahead with your question or comment.
Sure, I think it can. And it's going to take people like you, people like Miriam, Francis, Awich, and Ntambi to do that, to raise awareness, to call on these people, to challenge them.
Why are you
Because
excluding yourself? Why are you excluding yourself? You mentioned all of
no,
that.
collectively, it's going to take all of us. We have to keep the pressure on, because at the end of the day, it's all about leadership. What we are lacking is not the will, but we lack the leadership. We lack activists coming forward and challenging these systems. Yes, we've seen a lot of pressure in the past from activists. We've seen a lot of pressure from opposition leaders. I don't think they are doing enough. Maybe the other point that I want to add is opposition. Their role is really to hold these people to account. They have to keep challenging the system. You can't walk away when it's politically expedient for you. You have to. I've seen, like, in some cases, I've taken, for example, when they were trying to pass that that amendment bill that the president is here to sign into law, I saw opposition walk out. It shouldn't be like that, because if you walk out, those guys are going to carry the day. You have to stay in there and fight, because President Yoweri Museveni or the NRM government is not going to hand you power. It's going to take a concerted effort from every single individual, pushing the needle and challenging these people wherever they can, to force them to agree or to see the other side. If we keep walking away, it's not going to happen. The other thing is, and I think this applies to the rest of the region, I think civil society has a role to play. The media has a role to play. Young activists from all sorts of corners, human rights activists, people who are environmental activists, people putting pressure on the system, because you have to bring pressure to bear for any change to happen. We've seen it even here. People have to hit the streets. People are gonna die for sure. That's the reality of how things work. But until that happens, there is no regime in power that is going to willingly, after serving 40 years in power, willingly relinquish that power. There has to be some kind of pressure. You look at, like, let's say, for example, Sudan, our neighbor Sudan. What happened in Sudan? It all came down to people not having enough food. Bread was scarce. The advantage Uganda has had, on the other hand, has been food. When I talk to people, when I visit other countries, the challenge that these countries have, they don't have food on the table. So Uganda has been blessed in such a way that you don't, even at the peak of, like, famine, you don't hear people dying of hunger, right? Compared to other countries like Ethiopia, all these countries in Central Africa, people die because of hunger. In Sudan, what forced the regime out was the price of bread. It has also happened in Tunisia and all these other places. So But unlike those places, Uganda still has this burgeoning civil society, young population that could ultimately force these people in power, out. If they stood up and started challenging everything that the regime has done, I don't think the regime will have anything to do. They cannot go on the streets and shoot everybody. No, they can't. So pressure, we need to assert more pressure on the regime. We need to call things out as they are happening, not to wait or not to walk away when they're making changes to a constitution. We should stick in there and fight. And lastly, I think that for any system really to change, it starts with the people. The revolutions that we've seen, whether it was in Tunisia, whether it was in Libya, whether it was in Syria, in Sudan, it took people, young people, hitting the streets. In Uganda, we haven't seen that. The people who, at least from my recollection, the only person that I know who really pushed the system to its knees was Vesige and his walked works and all that stuff. But they were never able to bring the system to its knees. They put pressure, but they were never able to succeed. So it's going to take more than just one individual, one political party to do it. All these political parties have to work together to make sure that they can push for change. And I think once that is achieved, I think we'll be able to maybe to have the kind of leadership that we deserve, not the kind of leadership that we have or we want, but something close to what we deserve.
All right, thank you, Paul, for that. Karim, I want to pose the same question to you because clearly all that we have been talking about points to a governance problem. So, how best can Uganda address its governance problems, especially in democratic principles?
I think the previous speakers have hinted on everything that needs to be done. I think there is need to have all hands on deck. We need civic engagement from the bottom up. We need to have people sensitized about their role in a functioning democracy. I think there is need also to liberate the civil society. People from the Center for Constitutional Government have to put in more hours in advocating for democracy for Uganda. But also there is a greater need for us to push the regime in power out, because the talks have been done. Now the need is pressure. Where how can we utilize our pressure from our different angles, be it the civil society, be it the regular activists, be it politicians, people in the informal and formal sector. How can they utilize their space to push the regime out so that we can realize the kind of democracy that we all need and we all deserve? Otherwise, we can all talk about our aspirations, but if we don't put in the right hours, if we don't commit deliberately and intentionally, we might end up not realizing it. I've heard it from different experts that for people to realize what they're aspiring for, be it professionally, be it in entertainment or in any other sphere, you have to put in a minimum of 1,000 hours of commitment.
Yeah.
So we are here only for 2 hours every week. Maybe there is need for us to add our voices on different platforms. There might be need for us to keep engaging other stakeholders within the civic space so that we have so many players. We could be having the resource, we have the networks, but if we are talking within our own circle, the word might not get out there. So there is need for us to spread out, to make sure that this message gets to the lowest common denominator within our democracy. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Karim, for that. Now, as we begin to come to a conclusion of this conversation, one thing remains uh, huge on this, and I have just come across, not just, but when I was reading into this conversation as I prepared for the conversation, there was a report by I think I hope I pronounce it well, Bertelsmann Transformation Index. If you've come across it, the report said that. While Museveni's government promised a fundamental change in politics, economics, and society with the introduction of a grassroots-based participatory democratic system known as the resistance councils, if you remember, and a consultative constitutional making process that concluded in 1995, the country's democratic progress has taken a step backward. And I quote, Museveni's leadership has become more autocratic and his administration has deviated from the democratic and liberation ideals proclaimed in 1986. That is according to the report. As we conclude, Francis, do you agree we are taking a step backward as the country? Because certainly not with all the achievements we are seeing being outlined.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. In other words, we started taking steps backwards around, I think, 2000 and 2001. Because generally, even Museveni became a dictator, not recent. He had a master plan, like during the promulgation of the 1995 constitution. That's when Museveni started pulling out his real clause of dictatorship, but we did not pay attention to that. And it is a game that he masters very well. And I have told you that it has upgraded from being a dictatorial kind of government to a bloodthirst kind of government. And we people in opposition, should we say that everything is going to be a bed of roses? No, but we should prepare for hard time, because truth be told, we are not going to achieve what we need in bringing up clean government, in contributing to the democratic development of our country on a silver plate. So, and that process already, we have been in it. We have lost people. We have had people being tortured. We have had all sorts of things that you can talk about. But the report to say that Museveni is like a dictator of recent, that's not true. Right away from the word go, he was a dictator. And so I'm not surprised. But what I would have to say is that as the people in opposition and those in civil society organization, we should keep every other opportunity that we get. Yes, I know there is an effort to silence dissenting voices, but every opportunity that we get, we should keep sounding it over and over and over and over. And with that, we'll be able to build the momentum. But only my prayer is not until we raise the critical mass at grassroots level. Lynn, NRM was proud that they held elections almost in every village in the country. Right. Even other political parties can do that. We can do that. We have the capacity to do that. But because the freedom of expression, the space to operate is limited. That's why you find we are all operating in a small bubble. But if it is democracy matures and we are allowed, we can do that. And for your own information, by the way, the NRM, those structures were structures for Obote's government. When I was young, we used to have what we would call Mayumba Kumi. So when NRM came, it took over the same structure. It is not that it is the NRM structure. The NRM, they know nothing apart from grabbing what belongs to other people. So I still think we should keep fighting for civic space where we can educate the masses, and the moment we get the critical number of the masses, then we are able. The only solution to Uganda is to take up leadership, and then we again constitute and usher in the governance where structures are respected. But without that, sort of that, then as I have always said, Lynn, we would be smartly dressed going nowhere. But we still have hope. We have to keep pushing on and taking on this government. Otherwise, 2026, I know it will not be an easy task, but we have to run the race. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Francis. Miriam, and as we like, this is our concluding beat, and we are still asking ourselves because, according to the report, Museveni's leadership has become more autocratic, and his administration has deviated from the democratic and liberation ideals proclaimed in 1986. How that's true, I'm not sure, because we're seeing, and every time he's speaking to us, he says, in 1986, things were like this, but now things have changed.
Lynn, I think if we can go back and in our history, we should remember that the NRM of 1986 was a group of leaders who were elites, people who left public service universities and joined the struggle. All that group came, it gradually fell apart with the Museveni group, the core Museveni group, or Museveni himself, because I don't see anybody he has. Even today, if you look in his camp, how many people did he come with from NRM, the resistance, the Bush War, his comrades from the Bush, who he stayed with, even up to like when he changed the term limits. I think that's where the majority fell off. So when we refer to the NRM of the past, even he himself, Museveni, he should be honest to himself. The NRM of 1986 is not about Museveni. This was a group agenda. This was a group program which they had nurtured when they were in the struggle and had implemented. So, and that's what, if you compare today, you could see the difference. The governance at that time, you could see the difference in how they were conducting their accountability, how they were conducting their elections, how they were managing the security and all that, and compare it with today. The only thing that is a constant there is Museveni. But if Museveni was capable of doing that in 1986, 1990, 1996, why has he failed to do it today? That means Museveni as a person doesn't have that in him. He doesn't have the democratic credentials. He's just a military dictator and a military leader, just masquerading as a Democrat. And he even himself is, he mentioned that much in, I think it was in 2005 when they reverted to multi-party system, when he said about Jeko, like he wasn't part of that democratic agenda, and for him it was like, let's push them aside, and I pushes his agenda, which over time we came to see it was his life presidency or whatever you want to call it. But he doesn't have plans of retiring. He never mentions that. Okay, he says he will retire, but he never puts like a real program on ground and say after ABC I'm retiring. He mentioned that and then he backtracked on it, so it's not there. So his agenda is like rule until when he can't rule anymore, and democracy is not part of it, because democracy would be about what do people want. Mm-hmm. And that's the saddest part. Like, how do we make him retire? Will we do it through elections?
Well, the elections are almost here. You can decide on what to do. Paul Ndiho, conclusively on the same issue, we are asking, will we see a difference? The NRM is saying we have done a lot for this country. There's so much to be excited about, but reports indicate that there's regression. It is not substantial. It is not sustainable.
You are correct in a sense to say that the NRM has done much. When you look at the NRM in 1986 and the NRM in 2025, the difference is day and night. I can give you examples. When you crisscross the country, you see stuff that has been done. But again, to your point, I think democracy has taken a different turn, as and everything else in that country has also taken a different turn. Can Museveni sustain it for another 5 years? That question remains to be answered or remains to be seen. I think that it's going to be up to the people to say we either are done with the regime or we want you to keep, leading us forward. I think the opposition has a role to play here. The opposition has to figure out how to fight together, not as individuals, but together.
Right.
Because you cannot take out a system that has entrenched itself for 40 years in a country just like that. You cannot wish them away. Every institution revolves around the agenda they set in those 40 years. Everything revolves, whether it's the court system, for you to, let's say you went to court wanting to challenge the election, everything revolves around the system that has been built for 40 years. So there has to be a new approach, new ways of dealing with what we see. Short of that, we cannot wish away the regime. Museveni is going to do what Museveni does, and clearly, I would use these words. He's a true politician. He has studied how to keep himself in power, and he does it legally. That's the difference. He does it legally. There is no, take for example the most recent bill that they passed, where they have to try opposition and civil rights activists in military courts. It's done legally. So how are you going to point fingers that this guy did whatever? He's a dictator. He went through the system. Everything is legal. If he signs it into law, it will become the law of the land. So people who are opposing him have to figure out a way. They have to be creative. Whether they use AI, I don't know, to come up with different different strategies to get to that point where they challenge him and they are able at least to have what they want. But regardless of that, it's not going to change anything. The elections are going to come. If I could use these words, I don't think we have elections in Uganda. We have selections. Right? Why? Because if we had elections, then there would be changes. But most of the elections are predetermined. We know who is going to win, and in most cases, by what percentage. So that's why I call it selections, not elections. So the opposition has a long way to go. They have to work together to figure out how to get rid of a regime that has been in power for all these years. And I also think that going by Chinua Achebe's book, the famous Things Fall Apart, I think the center is about to collapse. So if the opposition can ride on that wave, looking at everything that is going wrong within the system itself, I think they can make headway. But until then, all of us have a responsibility, and all of us should do our best to make sure that we usher Uganda into a new form or a new direction.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Miriam. I saw you shake your head. Do you want to say something in regard to what he
Yes,
said?
Paul said that all he does it legally. But what is so legal about beating the people? What is so legal about kidnapping prisoners? What is so legal about? I mean, it's the illegal, or even the way they pass the motions. If really it's to be dissected and checked as per the books, it wouldn't even pass the minimum test and standard. So there is nothing legal about his dictatorship. It's just a dictatorship, period.
All right. Yes, indeed. And we hold elections. By like you've said, there's elections.
Elections, you called it selections, but even the rigging, they can't even pass the minimum standards. That's what I said. So there is
Uh,
nothing about it.
all right. But again, like he said, it is up to us to make the difference.
I agree
Yeah,
with that.
it's up to us to make the difference. So if we are going to the election, it's a selection, yes, but can we beat it? Because I think we have the man no, we have the capacity to beat that if we really want that. Instead of making noise day in, day out and being smartly dressed going nowhere, as Francis proudly states. So I thank you very much for your time. Francis, thank you for that statement. I use it even when I don't have to. But thank you very much, Francis. Karim. Karim, I
Thank
didn't pick
you.
your last comment. My apologies. Sorry. Karim, I need to pick your last comment as we conclude. My apologies. I thought I'd gone through everybody. Karim, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Lynn. I think we do a country a disservice when we compare 1986 to today. When you look at the crowds, when Museveni is addressing the nation, these people don't even have nostalgia of 1986. I am personally 40 years old, but I don't. I wasn't. I was those kids who were when people used to sing Abana Kumugongo that we were the kids of the war. So we don't know what happened before. So if you're to compare, you have to tell us that maybe in 2000 this was the number of and this was the unemployment rate, and this is how we have improved. In 2010, these are the numbers of referral hospitals, and this is how we have managed to remedy this. If you don't have that, and your intention is to take us back to 1986, I look at it as a scare tactic. It's like you're talking to Egyptians, and you're reminding them about the days of the Pharaoh. Oh, we have moved on from the days of the Pharaoh. When it's very disconnect. There is a very big disconnect when it comes to the population of Uganda. Most of Ugandans, almost 70%, are under the age of 30. They don't know. If you're to tell them about Obote, you have to. It's like a class of history. It's a total class of history to them. It does not inform to their current situation. So and if you're talking about real transition in how Ugandans can overcome this, we,
Right.
we cannot move on without looking at the playing field. If it's not leveled, even right now as we speak, I have friends who have been abducted in Buyendi. People who had just gone to consult in constituencies where they are going to run. They have been beaten up. Police is taking over all places. So we would be remiss. We would be totally remiss if we think this is going to be easy because Museveni is doing this legally. There is no elections. There is no fairness if the ground is not leveled for all players to participate. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Kareem. I see Paul has run away. Paul, it was lovely having you. Miriam and Francis, obviously, thank you very much for making time. And of course, Major Awich, who fell off earlier. I thank you very much for making time. Please subscribe and follow, share, and be part of these Civic Space conversations on our Civic Space channel on YouTube, on Twitter, formerly, rather on X, formerly Twitter. Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, and elsewhere that you will find us. Thank you very much. We'll catch you again next time. We wish you the very best.
Thank you, Lynn, and the rest of the panelists, and have a nice weekend.
You too.